Welcome to the Global Medical Device Podcast, where today's brightest minds in the medical device industry go to get their most useful and actionable insider knowledge direct from some of the world's leading medical device experts and companies.
The other day, I had this opportunity to actually be a guest on a podcast, so a little bit of role reversal. It was a podcast hosted by Aaron Moncur. Aaron is with Pipeline Design and Engineering, and his podcast is called Being an Engineer. And I loved it. I highly encourage you all to listen to it. And I thought, I wanted to talk to this guy a little bit more about being an engineer. So I invited him to be a guest on the Global Medical Device Podcast. So enjoy this episode. Hello, and welcome to the Global Medical Device Podcast. This is your host, founder, and VP of Quality and Regulatory at Greenlight Guru, Jon Speer. I'm pretty excited about this episode, mostly because, well, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons I'm excited about it is I got to be a guest on his podcast called Being an Engineer. I hadn't thought about how exciting it is to be an engineer until I got to talk to him. But let me introduce today's guest. It's Aaron Moncur. Aaron is the owner of Pipeline Design and Engineering. Aaron, welcome.
Thank you so much, John.
You're welcome. So I know you and we've only had a couple of chats and a couple of emails so far, and I'm just learning a little bit about who you are and what you do. But who better to talk about Pipeline Design and Engineering other than the guy that owns the business? So do you mind sharing a few words about your business and how you help people?
Yeah, absolutely. So Pipeline Design and Engineering, we're predominantly a mechanical engineering firm. We do product development and mechanical engineering. We started off a little over 10 years ago as we did general product design. So we would do, iPhone cases or a medical device or solar power equipment. It was kind of really broad in general. And then about 5 years ago, we started zeroing in on this niche of custom test fixtures and equipment for medical device companies. And it's kind of grown to the point where that's pretty much our sole focus. We still do a little bit of general product design, but the vast majority of our work is focused on developing turnkey custom test fixtures and automated equipment for medical device engineering teams.
Very cool. So you get to be an engineer like all the time.
I do. I would say a little bit less now than in the beginning. When I started Pipeline, it was just me. I was the sole staff of the company. So I got to wear a lot of different hats, and I definitely got to do a lot of engineering back then. The company, we're still fairly small. We have a team of 10. But these days, we've grown enough so that it's not just me, thankfully, doing the engineering. And I get to focus on a little bit of engineering. I certainly sit in on design reviews and help with some project management and things like that. A lot of my time these days is kind of acting more in the role of business owner, doing sales and development and things like that. But it's kind of a perfect blend for me because I would be sad if I didn't get to do any engineering at all. But I've also really grown to enjoy and appreciate the role of business development. That's been a new and very challenging adventure for me.
Yeah, and I love entrepreneurship and talking to startups and folks like you. And I'm always curious about, the origin story. What led you to start Pipeline Design and Engineering?
I got laid off.
Oh, yeah. I've been there. I've been there.
Yeah. No, it's a great little story, and I love kind of reliving it. It was very painful at the time, of course, but I was working at a product development company, engineering company, and great place, really good, solid people, very intelligent people. At a certain point, I guess I just stopped being engaged there. And, the people that ran the business, they were very bright, and they could tell that I just wasn't fully invested in the work that I was doing anymore. Then the recession hit 2008, 2009, and I got laid off in 2009. I started thinking to myself, maybe I'm not as engaged as I should be because I don't love engineering anymore. And so I started exploring a variety of different things. I was looking at commercial real estate and web design. I actually started a photography company and ran it for several years with a friend of mine. But in the end, I received some sage wisdom and realized that maybe it wasn't engineering that I had kind of fallen out of love with. It was the way in which I was doing engineering, which is kind of a subtle distinction, but an important one. And for me, what that meant was, as I got back into engineering, I say got back into it. I never really left it, but as I refocused my attention on engineering and less so on some of these other adventures that I had mentioned, I realized that I really loved having ownership over the whole process. In other words, instead of just being told to, here's some little piece of the project, go execute on that and figure that out, I really loved owning the entire thing, cradle to grave, not just the design of one aspect, but conceptually, what does this design look like? And then what are the details? How do we work those out? And then putting together all the drawings, the engineering documentation, then going out and finding vendors that could manufacture it, putting together prototyping, testing, and then delivering a final thing to the customer and managing that whole process. So it was kind of a revelation to me that once I was able to kind of take a step back and take high level ownership over the whole process, it was transformational for me. And I realized that it kind of sounds bad. I don't mean it in a bad way, but for me anyway, I much preferred, instead of being a cog in the machine, I preferred to be the machine. And that's kind of how everything changed. And I got back into engineering and love it.
Yeah. I mean, so before I started Greenlight, I ended up starting my own consulting practice, slightly different angle, but similar circumstances that kind of led me there. And my short story, I guess, if I get too long, just cut me off. But
no,
my short story is I was working for a product development firm as well. We did more, engineering work, design work, that sort of thing. That was our proposed mission. I don't know if we ever realized that dream. But long story short, one day I had gotten involved in some of the business development side of things and sales operations, and was fascinated by it. It was a skill set that an engineer doesn't typically have or gravitate towards naturally anyway, but it was a great way to learn about a business. And then my boss, the president of the company, called me in. I think it was a Friday before Memorial Day, whatever year that was, and said, "Hey, we're going to let you go." And I thought he was just telling me to go home early and enjoy the weekend. And I'm like, "Oh,
thanks.
Okay, thanks, yeah." And he's like, "No, we're letting you go." And like, I don't, does not compute, and then it clicked. It's like, oh, okay. And I was kind of dumbstruck, and I was like, what do I do now? And at the time I was married and had 2 young kids. And I remember trying to call home and share the news, and there was no response. And I suppose in hindsight, that was probably the universe doing me a favor. But I went into like this networking mode, and it's a switch just flipped, and I just started calling people like crazy during my commute home. And long story short, I keep saying that, but I keep rambling, don't I? But I had a couple opportunities with closer to home, better paying jobs, but I did that for a bit and I didn't enjoy it. And I'm like, well, I should just do my own thing. And then I started my own consulting practice and got to work with startups and manage projects and get ideas from cocktail napkin sketches all the way through the product development process. And, I was like, that's what I love. I like solving problems.
Okay, I know you're the host here, but I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
Do you think that you always had that innate sense of entrepreneurialism in you, or do you think it was brought out by the fact that you got laid off and then sounds like you started working somewhere else and you weren't into it? Do you think it was situational, or was it always just a part of you?
I've thought about that question. It's a really good one. I think at the time, or a few years ago, I would have said, entrepreneurship was sort of pulled out of me out of necessity. But then if I'm being, if I think a little bit harder about it, I go back to even when I was in high school and did I have a business? Well, sort of. I used to make tie-dye t-shirts and friendship bracelets and, used to sell them to people, take special orders and
there you go.
And that sort of thing. So I'm like, maybe it was there. And even the first job that I had out of college, it was with a large company, but it was still at that time owned and ran by the initial founder. So even though it was a large company, it was still very entrepreneurial feeling.
And I think that I think it's probably been in me for a while. What about you?
I have to agree. I think there's probably a balance. Some of it is situational for sure. If I had not been laid off, I probably would never have gone out on my own. So I look back and see being laid off as really in all honesty, one of the biggest blessings of my life. It's one of the greatest things that's happened to me. But even as a kid, I always loved, there's just something about the satisfaction of being able to make my own money, with my own thing. I remember I walked around the neighborhood soliciting neighbors to wash their cars.
Yeah.
I sold baseball cards. Yeah, there was just something about the ability to do my own thing, to be autonomous and make my own money that I think I've always loved.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with that. I think the same sort of circumstances. Had I not been laid off, I don't know that I would have ever thought about it. And sort of the trigger thought for me wasn't the being laid off part. It was the several months later, because of life and the circumstances that I had at the time. I really kind of had to have a job. I didn't have a nest egg to fall back on. I was younger than I am now for sure. So, there's mouths to feed and mortgages to pay and car payments and all that sort of thing. I'm like, I got to get a job. So I kind of jumped into it. Eyes wide open. I knew that, was this going to be my forever thing? No, but at the same time, we couldn't go weeks and weeks and weeks without income coming into the house. It was sort of in that, I'll call it the rebound job, that I started to think back about the place where I got laid off from. Like, wait a minute, that particular business had 4 founders, which is unusual, but and none of those 4 founders agreed with each other. They did not have a shared vision, and they survived as a business for 5 years. And I'm thinking, if those guys could do it without even being aligned with each other for 5 years, surely I could do this on my own for as long as I want.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
And I'm curious to hear your response to this, but then you start your own thing and you jump into it. And there was a period of time, a few months, where there was some overlap. So I had the day job, but then nights and weekends, I did some consulting on a few projects, and then you kind of build up that nest egg. And then there was a point where I'm like, all right, it's big enough. I can make the leap. I felt like there was enough in the pipeline, no pun intended, to go out completely on my own. And, looking back, I was like, if I knew now what I did, or knew then what I do now, would I have made that leap? The answer is probably no, but I'm curious, when you made that leap and said, I'm going to do this, how terrifying was that?
Maybe it was me being young and naive, but it wasn't. Losing my job was far more terrifying than starting a company. I remember feeling physically ill for several days after I got laid off. But this to it, I'd been in the industry for several years. And so I knew, some people, at least. It was a small network, but I had a network. And I started reaching out to people and saying, hey, I'm doing some freelance work. If you, could use any help with engineering or design. And I got my first small job, and I got paid like $30 an hour or $35 an hour. It was not a lot, but I loved it, just being able to do everything, being in charge of it all. I loved that feeling. And my wife always laughs at me because even to this day, I kind of say, it's not a real business. It's just something I do. And eventually it's all going to blow up and fall apart. But for a long time, it didn't feel like a real business. It was just me kind of freelancing. And then, steadily and slowly that kind of grew until I had more work than I can handle. And then I took on employees and things like that. But I guess it didn't feel scary to me. It was really more thrilling than anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's something thrilling about being scared at times too.
That's true.
But I like what you said a moment ago about, and I'll paraphrase it a little bit. When you are the one responsible for the new business, it puts a different perspective on it.
It does, absolutely.
It puts more pressure, but at least the way I thrive at times is pressure is a good thing.
I agree. It certainly does put a different perspective on it because Now I worry that I'm going to cost as disparaging to employees or frontline workers, but that's not the intent at all. The world needs employees that actually do that work. But from this is probably more on me than anything else. I didn't love doing this narrow slice of everyday work back when I was employed at a design firm, an engineering company. And I mean, my bosses saw it. I wasn't engaged, and that's why I got let go. But owning the business, that flipped the paradigm upside down, immediately. Because now, if I'm not engaged, mortgage doesn't get paid, can't buy clothes for the kids and put food on the table. So it is very motivating, not just from a financial standpoint, but it's also just so fulfilling to me personally to have this baby that I've birthed and grown into a young adolescent now. So really a different perspective.
Yeah, and I am sure we could talk for days about entrepreneurship and our respective journeys. I want to know more about Pipeline, and I know a very small bit, but I know you do some work for medical device companies. I know I'm not asking you to share who you're working with, but what types of things do medical device companies contact you for and assist? What kind of assistance are you providing them?
Let's say that you needed to have your tools removed. Are you going to go to a general practitioner?
No.
Why not? I mean, they're trained as a medical professional. They could probably figure it out, right?
Well, they probably could figure it out. What other kind of damage would they do along the way? I don't know, and I don't feel like being the experiment where they learn.
Okay, fair enough. So maybe you'd go to a specialist like a doctor. Fair?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, but I mean, going to an ENT, that's going to be more expensive. Is it really worth it?
I mean, that's what they're trained for, right? What they're there for. They're a specialist. I mean, I know your line of questioning is intentional, but it's I even liken that to like consulting. Like somebody would like back in the day, they're like, "Oh, but John, your rate is more expensive than this other person." I'm like, yeah, and I have direct experience that pertains to the thing that you're trying to do. So do you want to pay that other person extra dollars? May seem like their per hour rate is less expensive, but I could probably do it faster. And in the end, it'll be less expensive and you'll have higher assurance that it's done right because I've already done this. They haven't. So you choose.
Exactly. Thank you for playing along with my little charade there. Clearly, the point I'm trying to drive home is we're experts at what we do. We're specialists. I saw something on LinkedIn, and I'll get into more, what it is Pipeline does, but I want to kind of set some context here. I saw something on LinkedIn the other day. It was, I think it was a CPA, and he was saying that he has 10 or 15 years of experience as a CPA. So when he bills you for 30 minutes, you're not paying for 30 minutes of time. You're paying for the 15 years of experience this person has learning how to do things well and right and quickly. And I thought that was a really cool thing to say. So for us, we, again, our mission statement is we develop custom key test fix and automated equipment for medical device engineering teams. And we have spent many years developing this niche internally. A lot of engineers, they can put together a test fixture, but it's kind of like the general practitioner analogy. It's not focused on every day. Maybe they spend like 5% of their time designing a test fixture or the equipment, whereas all that we do, we spend all of our time developing these test fixtures and equipment. So we have built up this expertise and this specialty in-house, and we're not for everyone. Some people would rather just do that internally. I'll share one anecdote with you that kind of a success story for us. One of our biggest customers, a large medical device manufacturer, and before working with Pipeline, they would do their own test equipment, their own fixtures. And there's something called an MSA, measurement systems analysis, which tells you how repeatable or how well does your measurement system work, which in this case is the test fixture or the piece of equipment. And their first pass success rate when they did this MSA was 50%. In other words, 50% of the time they would get data from this piece of equipment that was inconsistent enough that they could not proceed because they just weren't confident in the data that they were getting. So that was before they started working with Pipeline. Now, it's been many years that we've been working together, and they effectively use us for all of their fixture and equipment design now. Their first pass success rate for MSA is nearly 100%. That's a big difference. And we found that customers like this, that they have their own internal engineering staff, and they could probably do it on their own, but they're more concerned with getting it done quickly, accelerating their schedules, and our fixtures, they work. This is what we do, and so our equipment tends to work really well, and it accelerates schedules. And these are the customers that we found that we really work the best with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's terrific. So, if I'm a med device company, like, when in my journey should I be contacting you? I mean, I'm kind of getting the picture that you can play a role at various stages, whether that be in early product development or even, post-production.
You're exactly right. We can help kind of early in the development stage where you're not ready to manufacture anything, but you need to do some, for example, characterization testing. One company that we worked with where they had a device with a shaft, we'll call it. And this shaft, they needed to characterize the failure. And to do so, they wanted to place this shaft under a variety of different loads. And they wanted a torsional load, an axial load, and a lateral load. And they wanted to be able to apply any combination of these loads at different, magnitudes of scale, and then see if the device worked or not. So again, characterizing the failure mode. And we put something together for them that allowed them to do this. It was a little automated fixture that had some custom LabVIEW programming that we'd done to allow them to automate this testing. And that was, kind of early stage in their development process. On the other side of things, we also help people that are getting into production. They might need some kind of fixture or jig to do production assembly. So it really kind of spans the full breadth of product development from probably not like very early stage design, but once they have an initial concept or maybe a prototype and they need to start doing some evaluation and testing, kind of from there all the way through production is where we can help.
Cool. All right. I usually take a pause somewhere in the middle and remind folks who I'm talking to. So folks, I want to remind you, I'm talking to Aaron Moncur. Aaron is the owner of Pipeline Design and Engineering. And I love the URL. It's very easy to remember. It's designtheproduct.com. So go check that out. And, certainly want to remind you too that Greenlight Guru, we're here to help. We work exclusively with medical device companies. In fact, we're the only medical device quality management system on the market today. We're designed by medical device professionals for medical device industry and companies. We built our platform based on FDA regulations, ISO 13485, EU MDR, ISO 14971, Part 11, all of that's built in, baked in already off the shelf within the Greenlight Guru software platform. So if you'd like to learn more about Greenlight Guru, then I would encourage you to go to www.greenlight.guru to learn more. And we'd be happy to get on a call with you, do a demo of the platform so you can see how Greenlight can help you accelerate your product development efforts. All right. So Aaron, kind of getting back into the flow of things, as far as I can remember back and when I started my consulting practice, I tried to stay focused. There were lots of, I'll say, temptations that would pull me or tempt me, so to speak, into potentially other areas that weren't maybe a strength or an area that I knew a lot about. Back to your general practitioner line of questioning, I could have been that GP for some of these projects, but I tried to stay disciplined and tried to stay focused on my superpower, the things that I was good at. I assume you're probably tempted with similar sorts of things from time to time.
For sure. Yeah. In fact, I joined an organization a few years back called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. And I joked earlier that I'd tell my wife that it's not a real business. This is just something I'm trying and it's working so far, but it's probably going to blow up next year, whatever. And so something early on I realized I needed was some guidance as far as how to build a business. So I joined this group, Entrepreneurs Organization, and they have these monthly accountability group meetings where you get together with a small group of people, 5, 6, 7 individuals, and you share what's going on with your business. You get feedback. You offer experiences that might help those in your group. And early on, I'm so grateful for this. My group quickly identified that I would talk about, we design iPhone cases and medical devices and solar power equipment, or I had this, spiel of things that we did. But then we'd actually get to talking about what we actually did. And they pointed out pretty quickly that, hey, you say that you do all these different things, but really it sounds like you mostly design test equipment for medical device companies. And I was like, well, yeah, that's true. And they're like, why are you talking about iPhone cases and, other general product design, consumer design products? You should just be focusing on medical device or test fixtures.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, well, yeah, of course I should. That makes so much sense. But, in hindsight, I don't know. I couldn't see it until someone kind of hit me over the head with it. And since then, we've since defined our mission as turnkey custom test fixtures and automated equipment for medical device engineering teams. And having that clarity has really been kind of liberating, actually. It narrows our focus as far as what groups we're trying to market to and what skills we're trying to develop. And it's allowed us to focus on developing some skills internally that we probably wouldn't have if we were just, being kind of GPs, so to speak.
Yeah, for me, the epiphany moment, I was networking like crazy, trying to grow this consulting practice. I would go I asked a lot of people to lunch and coffee and all these sorts of things. And I would go everywhere, within a couple of hours of where I lived to try to build a book of business. But I, picked up that networking, building that network was really important. And there was one person that I remember, he looked at me and he's like, you need a partner. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, you need somebody that you can partner with that's aligned from a vision perspective, and so you can stay focused. And it was an interesting comment, one that I hadn't really thought about or considered. And then soon thereafter, I had lunch with a gentleman. I'll give him a shout out. I haven't talked to him in a while. It'll remind me to give him a call too. But the guy's name is Scott Durlacher, and I remember meeting him for lunch one day, and we hit it off right away. And I told him about what I was doing, and he was kind of in between things, doing a little bit of consulting here and there, and we partnered. And that was so important because we were able to align, and we were good complements to one another. Did you find that a similar sort of, I guess, epiphany or path along your way with Pipeline?
Not yet in Pipeline. Well, let me clarify. Are you asking about like a business partner or more like, I don't know? Well, I guess I'll just leave it there. Are you referring to more like a business partner?
I mean, I guess in a matter of speaking, we were. I guess one could say, we were business partners, but I think more than anything else, it was like more of a mentor or somebody that was a trusted advisor, probably more than anything else.
I've certainly had mentors and trusted advisors and things like that. I mentioned EO. The people I've met there have been just fantastic in helping me clarify what it is I'm trying to do. Before that, I was part of Strategic Coach, which is another kind of entrepreneur organization that helps entrepreneurs do businesses. So for sure, there have been a lot of key mentors that have helped me along the way, and I'm sure there will be many more.
All right, so I don't do this very often. Sometimes we get down and nerdy with regulatory and quality and all that sort of fun stuff, which I enjoy those things too. And I don't always do this on podcast, but I guess I'll put you on the spot a little bit. I guess this whole conversation has been somewhat putting you on the spot, so thanks for playing along. But what is the most fun project that you've had an opportunity to be involved with? And again, I appreciate you may not be able to divulge all the super specific details, but what is the most fun and why was it the most fun?
The most fun. So there are two that come to mind. The first one was fairly early on in my pipe career, maybe just a couple of years after I started the company. I meant that I had started a photography company with a friend of mine. We ran for several years, and that overlapped with the beginning of Pipeline. So I was doing photography and really into photography, still am. And someone approached me, an inventor, with a product. It was this holster. For any of you that do photography, you'll appreciate that nice lenses can get heavy and they're really expensive, and it's kind of a pain to have to change them out. If you're shooting away something, you have to run back to your bag, lug out this big lens, and then run back. This product was a lens holster. And it would attach to a belt. And it was just this really cool mechanical design that allowed you to hold a lens or multiple lenses on a belt, just on your hip, and then very quickly twist and lift them off and then put it onto your camera. And it was a relatively simple product, but there were some clever mechanics involved. And, got to be involved start to finish. That was a really fun experience. So that the other one that comes to mind was more recent, a few years ago. And this was a very sophisticated piece of test equipment. It had a variety of different modules that were all integrated into a single system. And then we automated it with some LabVIEW code that we wrote. It included a laser vision system that would contactlessly measure the RPM of a shaft that was spinning real fast, many thousands RPM. It would also measure the wobble of this shaft, and it would move up and down axially along the shaft and measure the straightness of the shaft. And then we had this particular device also pulled. So we had a pressure sensor that was attached to the system, and it would measure the vacuum pressure that was being pulled by the. Because the shaft spins, obviously there's some input torque that causes that rotation to happen. And we had a rotary sensor that was integrated as well. And it was one of the larger systems we've developed. It was certainly not a desktop unit. It was all mounted to a cart. So it will on maybe, 3 feet by 2 feet or something like that deep, and maybe 4 or 5 feet high. But there was just a lot going on for this particular project. I think we had 4 engineers working for about 6 months full time to get it done. And towards the end of development, we were scheduled to deliver this on Tuesday. And our customers are very, very schedule driven. I think that's true for a lot of medical device companies, more so than other industries, I think. And so we were committed to this Tuesday delivery date. And the Thursday prior, we started looking at what we still needed to finish by then. And we realized we're not going to make this. There's too much to do to deliver before Tuesday. So our team pulled together, and Thursday night, I think we were up until 1 a.m. And Friday night, we pulled an all-nighter. Saturday, we continued working all day, took a break Sunday morning, but then Sunday afternoon, we're back at it. I think we stayed up until 3 a.m. that night. The following day, Monday, was a holiday, and we took half day off, but then we worked the second half of the day, and we got it done. We finished it, and we delivered it on time. And it was just such a tremendous accomplishment by our team, the team Pipeline, that I always look back very, very fondly on that experience, because it was a very technically challenging piece of equipment to develop. And then schedule-wise was also aggressive, and we made it because the team pulled together and people were willing to do what it took to deliver on time. So that to me was a huge win.
Yeah, and so not putting words in your mouth, but what I picked up on that, there's a few things that were probably enjoyable, so I'll speculate. Culture of closing, you got the job done. Teamwork, collaboration, that was probably pretty important. Yeah. And then also you solved a problem.
We did. Yeah. It was a technically challenging problem. There's always increased satisfaction when you solve something hard, right? I mean, the easy stuff is fine. That's fun too. But when you can crack a hard nut, there's nothing like that feeling.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So appreciate you playing along. So Aaron, before we wrap things up today, I'll give you the final word. What challenges or problems do you thrive at solving the most or the best or whatever the right way to describe that is? And how should people get a hold of you so that you can help solve some of their challenges?
Thank you for asking that. Time. I think it all comes down to time. If you need to finish a project faster than your internal resources allow you to do, that's where we can help. Not only because we're an external resource that you can plug and play, add to your team, but also because we have the expertise in this particular area to get things done very quickly. We have turned projects around in as quick as a week. Obviously, if it's hugely complex system, it's not going to be a week, but we can help people save time and get things done faster. And then how to get a hold of us. So you mentioned one of our websites. Turns out we actually have two websites, designtheproduct.com. That is the website that we've had for our entire existence back when we started as a general design company. More recently, we launched testfixturedesign.com. And that's the website that's really dedicated to all of our custom test fixture and equipment development. So either one of those websites, you can find us there. My name is Aaron Moncur, AARON MONCUR, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
All right, Aaron, I appreciate that. Folks, we'll share links to both testfixturedesign.com and designtheproduct.com in the text that accompanies this particular podcast. So Aaron, thank you so much. I enjoyed getting down and nerdy with you a little bit. And folks, I do want to, Aaron's got a new podcast. It is cool. I've listened to quite a few episodes. If you're a geek or a nerd and just love being an engineer like Aaron, then I would encourage you to find Being an Engineer. I totally messed that up, didn't I, Aaron? It's Being an Engineer.
At least you remember it. It's my podcast and I forgot to mention it.
Well, but where do people find Being an Engineer? Where can they listen to that?
Sure. Being an Engineer can be found on pretty much all the major podcast directories, iTunes, Spotify, Google, Pandora, all the major players.
All right. So folks, wherever you're listening to the Global Medical Device Podcast, search for Being an Engineer and you'll find it. And if not, send Aaron a note, send me a note, and we'll point you to where you can find it. So again, I want to thank my guest, Aaron Moncur. He is the owner of Pipeline Design and Engineering. And folks, thank you so much for being a listener of the Global Medical Device Podcast. If this is your first time, welcome. We have 100 and I don't even know how many, well over 100 episodes for you to catch up on. So enjoy that. And for those that have been longtime listeners, loyal listeners, thank you so much. It's because of you that we continue to be the number one podcast in the medical device industry. As always, this is your host, founder, and VP of Quality and Regulatory at Greenlight Guru, Jon Speer, and you have been listening to the Global Medical Device Podcast.